Hello and welcome to episode 51 of PubShorts. Open
51
your
already. Good.
yes, 51 episodes, and let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. KK. I am the innovation officer at Trincan Inago. And Tony, please introduce yourself.
It's like we're almost getting into cricket scores here, second half century. So I'm Tony O'Rourke, Vice President for Partnerships here at Inago, and I look after the commercial relationships around products and services with publishers and increasingly with research organizations around the world.
And Tony, we are just 60 episodes away from Nelson, 111, which is a cricket score that Dickie Bird, if you remember, used to do. Do you follow cricket?
I do, but I always feel that my colleagues in India have a far greater knowledge of English cricket than I do.
All right, all right. Yeah, let's talk about why we have named our episode "Open Your Eyes." Tony,
I did wonder whether you're referring to the Snow Patrol song or the album by the 70s prog rock super giants, Yes,
well,
also called Open Your Eyes.
I was not aware of this Yes record, but I was referring to the Snow Patrol song. But it's also related to a story that we're covering, right, Tony?
Yes, indeed. And before we carry on, if anyone is interested in that kind of music, I absolutely recommend Close to the Edge by Yes is probably one of the best records made by anybody ever. Anyway, back to this.
Yeah. So why did we title the episode "Open Your Eyes," Tony?
Well, because I think we need to open our eyes to a lot of what's going on around the world, particularly with changing sort of the stuff that's going on in the US at the moment, the changing landscape. Um, and we need to spotlight some of the new initiatives that are coming through in open science, in AI assisted peer review, and the whole review process.
Yes, and thanks for the excellent segue because we are starting off with an open archive news story. So it's titled Open Archive Launch to
Yeah,
sustain and expand preprint sharing in life and health sciences. So,
yeah.
Tony, quickly explain what Open Archive is and what it was before, please.
Well, Open Archive is a new organization. It's not the background itself is not new. It was started by it was the originals is Cold Spring Harbor laboratories in the US who are responsible for two of the most important preprint services in the world, MedArchive and BioArchive, and a new organization has been created, a new not-for-profit organization
Yeah.
has been created in order to um, improve the opportunities of funding and to give a lot more focus on long-term sustainability
Right.
and the future needs of the research community. So by creating a separate organization to really invest in the future.
Right. So the key point here is that it is now sort of rebranded and it's become an independent non-profit. And the reason why they've done it is for sustaining and expanding preprint sharing, especially in life sciences. And so, as you mentioned, it was previously the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, and but it has received a lot of funding. Tony, I guess you're aware of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
As did Cold Spring Harbor before, there were the laboratory is also not for profit, and it relied very much on long-term funding from organisations like these.
Yeah, so I was not aware of the funding from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative as well as the BMJ Group and Yale School of Medicine. And why is it an independent profit and it is categorized as a 501c3 nonprofit under
Yeah, there
US?
are different categories of not-for-profit in the US.
Yeah, and for as you mentioned, long-term sustainability and flexibility for the future, as well as broad community oversight. So excellent
Yeah,
initiative. And I have actually, Tony, a couple of other stories. In one news story and sort of a segment from Journalology. So I'll switch to the second one. So this is a Nature news article again. As you can imagine, this is a big story in the world of science and academia as well as open science. So preprint sites BioArchive and MedArchive launch a new era of independence. So independence because they are under this new organization, and it is supported by a $16 million grant from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. I was not aware of it. This is obviously Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, and it
yeah,
is funding
yeah,
from there. So that's a lot of money, which is great for open science.
yeah.
And if to contextualize this for people who are not aware of preprint, so these are pre-publication repositories where researchers can share their findings immediately, and it can be widely shared. It does not it's not bottlenecked by editorial and peer review, and that can happen separately. So you could have a version of a research paper on a preprint server, and an updated version of the same paper being published in a
Yeah,
journal after peer review.
that's
So
what I mean. And these preprint servers have got a history going back over 30 years. I mean, the archive, ARXIV, the physics archive, has been going since the early 1990s.
yeah.
And even but the concept of preprints has been going on for many years, where researchers would send in the post before publication, i.e., preprint,
Mhm.
um, the versions of their papers to share with their colleagues in their community. So what organisations like Archive have done is really to, and bioRxiv, medRxiv equally, has really to create almost a first port of call for any researcher in those subject areas, because they know the newest research, most up-to-date research is going to appear generally, depending on the subject area, of course, on those preprint services first before
Right.
they get formally published.
Right, and this article mentions that bioRxiv was launched in 2013, and in 2019 medRxiv was launched, and
Yeah,
medRxiv became famous for all the preprints regarding the COVID pandemic that were
yeah, yeah,
published, and
yeah.
it also got some notoriety because of the fact that some questionable claims were published, and that is something, as in the validity and robustness of these preprints in terms of that's a challenge as well, and
Oh,
for which.
it is, but I know firsthand an awful lot of work's been going on to remove that uncertainty.
Right. And lots of readers, and the numbers are sort of mind-boggling, and about 4,000 in bioRxiv per month submissions, new submissions, and
Yeah,
about 1,000 new submissions
yeah,
in
yeah.
medRxiv. That's a lot.
That's an
So
awful lot of content.
yes, and so Journalogy, which is a newsletter that Tony, you and I read weekly. It is maintained, published by James Butcher, and James had a long form piece regarding this news, and basically he interviewed John Inglis, who's part of the board, the chair of the board actually, which for Open Archive, and some of the questions were asked regarding how is this funding going to affect, and how is it going to be utilized. So I'm just going to read out. So John Inglis states, and I quote, beyond providing seed capital, these funders will look for evidence of broader adoption and long-term impact. For example, growth in preprint submissions, participation from a wide range of life sciences research fields, and geographically diverse research communities. In other words, success for them isn't about short-term metrics, but about continuing to support the adoption of preprints in scientific communication worldwide. Excellent.
Well, the success for them is to ensure the adoption of the fact that good content, good research is available quickly at no cost to the researcher.
Right. And another, so what are the, so how will you measure success, right? That's what you use, key performance indicator. So John Inglis said this, and I quote, Open Archive's mission is to provide support for bioRxiv and medRxiv and preprint adoptions. So its KPIs will include growth in preprint submissions, especially from first-time users, the speed of manuscript sharing, how quickly new findings appear compared to traditional publishing timelines,
Yeah.
diverse global participation, increased uptake across regions and research fields, community engagement metrics, and increases in readership measured through usage data from page views and downloads. So we are also interested in the growth of the ecosystem around preprints, example peer review and other forms of preprint evaluation, tracking links for data sharing. So it covers a lot, and I'm very happy that it is geographically being, as in at least the plan is for more diversity as well
They've
as for
had all
first timers.
192 countries.
Yes. Yes, and Tony, this is an interesting thing that James shared. This is from the Dimensions database. You can see the trends in terms of submissions.
Yeah,
So this is last year 432,000 preprints were posted, 56% of which were on Archive, the physics preprint server, which is what you mentioned 30 years
yeah.
ago. So the volume of preprints dropped in 2023 and 2024 according to the data set, but that really it's probably misleading in the sense that there is already a huge growth before it, and this is
Well,
this.
there was that COVID factor, wasn't there?
Yes.
People were home, they were writing up research that probably would have taken them a little bit longer to do in any normal time. So a lot more papers were being submitted to preprints as well as the journals.
Yeah, and that's for open. Sorry, that is for Archive. This is for the blue line is for bioRxiv, and this is for the orange one is for
It's
medRxiv.
with bioRxiv and with medRxiv. I'm not sure with medRxiv, but some with bioRxiv, they've actually exceeded the number of papers they had even at the COVID peak, which is fantastic.
Right. So a lot of activity, a lot of news, and it's a great initiative, I mean, great development, I would say, the Open Archive, as well as it becoming a non-profit, and considering the amount of submissions that are coming,
And
generally as well as for preprint
what's
stuff.
great now, there's pretty much a good, solid, sustainable preprint archive available in every major subject domain. In physics, in medicine, biology, in chemistry, in life sciences. There are plenty of choices for the author to use. And if they're not sure about which service to use, Inargo helps. We have a publication support team that can help them select the right preprint archive and also the right journal if they need
Excellent.
that.
So where can somebody find more about this if they
Oh,
would?
they can just contact inago.com and go to the publication support page.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. So we are moving on from the Open Archive story to another story from the US. This is published as a news release by the NIH. So NIH centralizes peer review to improve efficiency and to strengthen integrity.
Yeah,
So the main news is that NIH has centralized peer review, which is basically it was spread across, let's say, one main center as well as many peripheral centers. Everything is now coming under the same umbrella, and that center is the Center for Scientific Review (CSR), and this change, the NIH is hoping to save more than 65 million US dollars annually by eliminating duplicative efforts. And so the other centers that I'm talking about, which is abbreviated as IC, are NIH institutes and centers. So the new centralization effort, Tony, will only apply for the first stage of the review process, and we are talking about the reviews, peer reviews of grants, right? We are talking about that, and that
yeah,
basically means that the 22% of peer reviews that were happening in the institutes and center will now get to be done by the
yeah.
Center for Scientific
So
Review.
there'll
So
be a first level of screening done centrally before it's
yeah,
allocated to the individual research
yes.
centre.
Yeah, so it's actually it's like it's a better way to manage budget cuts, I would say. We are still maintaining whatever we need to do instead of other sort of more drastic measures. So it's a good thing. I would think that any centralized review process would probably improve the quality of the review as well.
I hope so. I mean, my concern is that these centres exist for a reason, because they are centres of excellence in their own right. Whether this by centralising these decisions, whether the right decisions can be made when those new grant applications come in. I hope it will. I'm sure it will. But I think that we have to wait and see in terms of how effective this new process is going to be. The one thing I would say, KK, is that grant application writing is no small task, as every researcher will know. And we have a full service support for the researcher. If they're looking to write a grant
Mm-hmm.
application, whether it's NIH or any grant organisation in the world, we can either provide support in terms of editing the existing grant application or helping the researcher to actually formulate and write that grant. So they just need to contact us again at inago.com.
Excellent, excellent. Naga.com probably publication. It's probably under publication support, I would believe.
And other publication support. But
Yeah.
you go to inago.com or even just search
Mm-hmm.
a grant application or grant writing Inago on Google and you'll find us.
Right, right, right. Moving on to our next main story. This is an announcement. eLife and SciSco partner to enhance rigor and reproducibility in scientific publishing. So, Tony, eLife is a non-profit organization that is committed to improving the way research is reviewed and communicated. And SciScore, are you aware of SciScore?
By name, I don't know an awful lot about SciScore. I know it's one of these, again, up and coming, very important, potentially very important new metric services that's being developed.
Yeah, so it's a brand that provides AI based checklist automation basically, and it checks scientific manuscripts for adherence to standards. It's primarily sort of focused on the clinical trial, the clinical medical trial spectrum, all sorts of checklists like consort and things. It checks as in each manuscript or the document
Yeah,
would be checked.
it's checking against various sort of national, international standards like Consort
Yeah.
or HMDAR.
Yeah, so as is written here, it assesses manuscripts against reporting criteria including NIH, MDAR, Arrive, Consort, and RRE standard. So, and it eventually generates a score which will tell you that if it meets the manuscript meets it or not. So it's a great development. One of the things, as in medical trials, there's a lot of such checklist sort of filling that needs to be done, and if automation would always be helpful. And the whole point of such partnerships is to ensure that the reproducibility of science, especially medical and life sciences, is there's a crisis for it and it is addressed. And I think it's a great move. Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, this is a space that's becoming increasingly popular, providing tools that will help determine whether the every aspect of that document or every aspect of that process is being properly adhered to. So it's an interesting space at the moment.
Yeah, and as is mentioned, so if you're wondering about SciScore, it also gives you a detailed report which highlights areas such as randomization, important in a medical context, blinding of a study, and sample size estimation. So all of
Yeah,
these things, including the authentic resources of all the biological, samples, etc. So it's a very sort of exhaustive report. Those interested should check it out, and especially if you are in the medical and life sciences
yeah,
research, this is a good.
absolutely. It's created by scientists for scientists, so I think it's an interesting project.
Yeah. And we are moving on to controversial retraction watch stories. It's titled Guest Post: Should Zimbardo Stanford Prison Experiment be retracted? So, are you familiar with the Stanford Prison Experiment?
Not before we had this conversation before this recording, KK. No, I'm
Yeah.
afraid I wasn't
So,
familiar with it.
So why is this relevant is because the person who conducted the study, the controversial study, Philip G. Zimbardo, has passed away in the October of last year. So it's his experiment is a very well known but controversial study, Stanford Prison Experiment. It is a simulation, a psychological simulation carried out in the university psychology department in August of 1971. Now, it has been met with skepticism by a lot of researchers, and a social scientist named Thibault Letexier. Is that right? Am I pronouncing it right?
Just, I think it's Tixier,
Texier. Yeah, has raised questions about the scientific validity of the investigations. It continues to be reported in textbooks and everything. So, what are the problems with it? So, he is this article sort of explains that the study is lacking in scientific credential. It does not, for example, it did not have a control group. It did not have a theory. It did not have proper hypotheses, and the originality of the design itself is being questioned, as well as the subjects were voluntarily participating, but they were treated in a way that would not be acceptable in the current day and age. So should we continue to treat them? There are some images to sort of replicate the experience. So these are not actual prison mates. These are just students volunteering and play acting to be prison mates as well as security guards. So the interactions were studied, and eventually, there is a question of privacy and whether the experiment was actually like a play being enacted out by people, or whether there was actual validity, it is still being questioned. So the final question is, considering all of this, isn't it time for this to be retracted? And so we've been debating this: should older science be retracted, because the foundational papers, if they are found to be flawed, then why should they be continually cited? So your thoughts on this, Tony?
Well, first of all, I don't think I'm in a position to say whether a paper should be retracted or not. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist in any way. If there are ethical issues that have been highlighted, or perhaps question marks around the validity of the foundation of the research, then that's a conversation that has to be had with the research group. It's difficult to say. I don't really want to make a comment on that. I think the fact that this research has been going on over 50 years. Mm-hmm. It's taken this long to highlight this. Makes me wonder that there probably was some valid, strong reason to want to be able to continue the research.
So I think this the latest set of criticism is recent, but at the same time, this has been criticized over the years. Even though I don't have any evidence from this article, but I would think that it has been criticized. But right now, there is a sort of sufficiently the volume of criticism is sufficient for us to debate whether it should be retracted or not.
Listen, I'm old fashioned when it comes to some of this research. I do think sometimes good research comes at a cost. Okay, there has to be some kind of policing and management of that, of course, but we wouldn't be where we are today without innovation.
Right. So
and anyone, KK, head of innovation.
Thank you. So another question is, if suppose, let's say, Tony, you are a researcher in this field, and should you cite this experiment, and if assume that this article is retracted, shouldn't you be let known, as in the sense, if you cite this, then that is a black mark against your paper, because you have probably cited
Oh,
poor.
we've had this conversation before, and I agree. If a paper is retracted, then it needs to be communicated to the community very clearly.
Right, and there are several tools that will help you with this, and
Yeah, yeah.
we have our own tool, right, Tony?
We do, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have a reference quality checker as part of our Inago report service, which will inform the user whether references in their citation list have been retracted or not,
Yeah,
and
and
that can fundamentally change the findings of a research paper.
we use the retraction watch database, the same source of this article, for categorizing, or identifying which articles were retracted.
Sure, sure.
And we are also working on, Tony, the a peer review assistant sort of a product, where we will look at the relevance of citations in the context of the research as well, which will also include whether the cited papers are retracted or not, which is also available through our reading assistant Inago Read, right?
Yeah,
When you are
yeah.
doing deep reading. So for those interested, you can check out Inago Read as well. Just go to search for Inago Read on Google, and you'll find it. It is one of the one of the features or products within the Trinkas extended ecosystem that we provide for all sorts of research, writing, and reading assistance.
Yeah.
All right, Tony, the last main story is a Silverchair, I guess, announcement. Clocks, CLOK. So CLOCK double S joins the Silverchair universe. It really sounds, these headlines make me feel as if we are watching a press news about a movie. But
Well, you can
anyways,
see clocks is.
well, clocks. I found out as I was researching this. It's an acronym for control initialism for controlled lots of copies. Keep
Yeah,
stuff safe. I
yeah.
wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. These services are they kind of they're kind of almost like disaster recovery services for academic content.
Right.
Have been around now for quite a long time. Certainly, when I worked in publishing, organisations like Clocks, and there's another one from Ithaca in the US called Portico, which kind of does a similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
Exists to ensure the long-term preservation of research content. So should an article disappear, should a journal disappear, should a journal be closed, or
Mm-hmm.
should a publisher disappear for whatever reason, financial reasons, whatever, if they have entered into an agreement with Clocks before they
Mm-hmm.
have gone into liquidation, then Clocks has almost an obligation then to make that content available for the research in the future.
Right. And so
It's kind of, it is a disaster recovery service for academic content.
yeah, but the thing
I think.
that clocks is, I think, is I guess differentiating from other things is its commitment towards open access.
Yeah,
So it would make in the case of a disaster, in example of a disaster or a failure of an institution, the content will be made freely available to the public under a Creative Commons license, and it includes content such as research articles, books, data sets, multimedia, and other supporting material. So this ensures basically Silverchair partnering with the clocks means a seamless access to such content, and it's also seamless integration between these services.
yeah,
Eventually, it sort of it makes sure that the academic ecosystem is more resilient, and that's
yeah.
one good thing. We need to build strong infrastructure for
And
research.
one of the things that we've seen over the last 10 years with the real growth of open access, the fact that so many more new publishers have entered the marketplace, and there's less kind of barriers to entry
Mm-hmm.
for new publishers, is that there seems to be almost a lot more transience. Um, there's almost a temporal nature that publishers that are here today may not necessarily be here in 5 years' time. So I think it's really, really important, particularly in light of that organisations like Clocks exist to ensure the kind of the long-term sustainability and resilience of academic content.
Excellent. So moving on to a couple of quick hits. The first one is related to things that we have talked about, but that it's titled Taylor and Francis journals now available to researchers at thousands of Indian institutions through the
Yeah,
One Nation One subscription. So
yeah,
when I looked at it, it is actually Taylor and Francis was originally a part of it. What has changed is, Tony, is that the entire catalog of over 2,500 peer-reviewed journals is now available under the One Nation One subscription plan, as opposed to some 2,100 or something as per my
right.
research. So
No.
this is just expanding and providing coverage for their entire catalog. Excellent news for Indian researchers, right?
Oh, yeah. We've talked about the One Nation, One Subscription thing before. And in fact, we've even written a report to advise publishers on how to really uh, best take advantage of the One Nation, One Subscription deal. They should come and talk to us if they want to find out. If you're a publisher, and you want to find out how you can get involved.
Yeah, and also why they should get involved, and if they are not involved, how they can strategize their
Yeah.
entire campaign in terms of in the Indian market. So this is what we have, well, we tried to put
Yeah,
out in the report.
I mean, I'm not going to try and predict the future, but one of the things I've always said, and I've long said, is that in many ways India is a sleeping giant when it comes to academic research. There are so many research institutes, so much good research taking place, but of course, in many cases, it's institutions which don't have the funding available to sort of keep up to date with the latest research.
Right.
Now, the One Nation, One Subscription means that every researcher in a government-funded institution will have access to the latest research, and that will then advise and inform them in terms of how their own research should go moving forward. And I think we're going to see a real growth as a result of this in output from Indian researchers.
Right. So once again, if you're interested in knowing what your strategy should be for regarding ONOS, One Nation, One Subscription, please
Yeah,
check out our report. You can find it on inago.com.
yeah,
And let us know. Let Tony know by contacting him on LinkedIn
absolutely.
if you need any help.
LinkedIn or at tonio@anago.com.
Right, right. And finally, the last quick hit. It is titled Easy Journal. It's from Robots Cooking. I think we talked about it last time as well. I think we will see more and more articles coming out from this. So this is an AI assisted publishing experiment. So in a nutshell, Tony, the person behind Robots Cooking used AI to create a publishing platform. Just using AI, the aim was to create a simple, practical journal platform. And there are some interesting insights. It's very simple, and you can imagine how it could be when you're creating such a thing with AI. And the development process that he states highlighted both the potential limitations of the current AI, the advantages as well as the limitations of the tool. And it reaffirms the fact that AI generated code is functional but often messy. And we will probably cover more such sort of AI experiments in the future. But interesting, right? Somebody tried to use AI to create an entire publishing platform itself.
This is yet another interesting experiment. We're going to see a lot more innovations like this coming up in the coming years and months.
Yeah, and this is the key thing. It's a hybrid workflow, as in the AI can be used to rapidly prototype things. And even if you're not a coder, we'll talk about this in the next episode when English has now become the primary coding language as per experts, which is true because you can ask, dictate to an AI and generate a program and a game and
Yeah,
all of those things.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
things are changing, and it's an interesting experiment. And robots cooking is an interesting place
We're
to.
going to get to the point, KK, where you've got an AI generated platform publishing AI generated papers which have been reviewed by AI. You know, at the moment, there is an absolute need for human involvement and human intervention. But this is a first step in terms of, or another step in terms of trying to understand, okay, what does the future really look like in terms of how content is going to be delivered to the researcher? And I think we need to keep a watching brief on all of these developments.
Right. Interestingly,
And if
Tony.
you are interested in that, well, that's kind of one of the reasons why PubShorts exist, is to talk about these new developments and how they impact on research today and possibly research tomorrow.
Right. And I was about to respond to it in the sense, in the future where AI is doing just about everything. And so what will humans do, right? As in humans would have just only time for leisure and, development and learning and skill. So this, I have just started reading, you probably are aware of the author, Ian M. Banks, the Culture series.
Ian Banks,
Yeah, yeah. So I've finished the first novel, and the second novel is
consider
so
Phoebus.
yeah, that's what I just finished. So in that universe, the advanced culture, and it's far far in the future.
Oh gosh, yeah.
The human beings do not have anything because AI or super AI, it's called the minds, are doing everything for them. So they have just become decadent, and they're trying to.
What did you think of that book?
I did not like Consider Flavors as much as the book that I just started, which is The Player of Games. It's the second in
Player
the
of
series.
Games, yeah.
Yeah,
No, those the first three or four Ian M. Banks, because Ian Banks. Sorry,
yeah,
we'll talk about this. Ian Banks was two authors. Unfortunately, passed away a few years ago.
yeah,
Ian Banks was Ian Banks, who wrote
yeah.
kind of like psychological thrillers, and Ian M. Banks, who was a sci-fi writer. Ian Banks himself was a sci-fi advocate, loved science fiction, and wrote a series of books about a very, very far in the future technology. And I personally love Consider Flavors. I thought it was one of the best books, one of the best
Oh,
sci-fi books I read at the time. But
interesting.
hey, each to his own.
Well, I was surprised in the sense that there's a lot of at least when I'm reading about it, that book is met with a lot of like criticism. People don't get into the book as much as one would like to, but I'm part of the book club. I think we have talked about it. So
Yeah, no, yeah, he's kind of
polarizing, you
I think he's one of the great science fiction writers. He wrote a lot in a relatively short period of time,
Hmm.
but I don't think he's quite in that Asimov or
Yeah.
Bradbury league yet. But who knows? I think over time we'll see that change.
Well, if anybody is interested when they listen to us talking about sci-fi, if they want to know more about your reading preferences or the things that you do, Tony, how can they get in touch with us?
Well, you're not going to find out much about my reading preferences because I don't publish about that online. But if you want to contact me about PubShorts or anything to do with the services that we provide, whether it's AI assisted editing and writing or around peer review services, you can contact me at tonyo@anago.com or you can reach KKRI on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, and also come and look at PubShorts. Come and look at the PubShorts channel. This is now episode 51. Our YouTube channel has over 50 episodes available. So I would encourage you to look at those episodes and give us some suggestions for future topics
Yeah,
as well.
and you can find PubShots under the Inago Global channel. If you search for Inago on YouTube, you'll find it. And if you find the
Right.
channel, there's a playlist for all the episodes of PubShots so far. And subscribe to the channel and hit the bell
Hit
notification icon. And if you
absolutely
if you
all of
resonate
that.
with the content, share it with your colleagues or friends, scientists, whatever it might be, and send
Yeah.
us comments and let us know what you would like us to cover. We'll do our best. All right, Tony. So that brings us to the end of episode 51. Open your eyes. And until the next episode, on behalf of Tony and the rest of the team who helped us in bringing such content, this is Dr. KK signing off. We'll see you in the next one, Tony. Bye bye.
See you next time.